push and pull game that's going on. I'm not sure. And Carney, he doesn't know enough French to call Pierre Poilievre a conspiracy theorist, so he has to switch over to English midway through. That's pretty funny. I've got that video for you this morning. UK going full 1984. Lots and lots of censorship, and I've got that for you closer to the end of the show. The economy is suffering in Canada, and layoffs are happening. Royal Bank is laying off a bunch of people kind of under the cover of darkness. Not a lot of headlines about that, which is not surprising, but it's interesting to watch. Bernier responds to Poilievre's housing proposal, saying it's not as good as it sounds, and Carney cancels an upcoming campaign stop because of tariffs, because of the new Trump tariffs that he announced yesterday. So there's a lot going on. And we've got, I feel a little bad. I don't want to highlight Carney so much, but his campaign is doing so terribly that we have a lot of Carney to watch. And he's a bad speaker. He's boring. He looks terrible, and he doesn't communicate well. And so I'm sorry because it's kind of boring, but we're going to have to go through it. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Trump's tariffs are back, right? The specter of tariffs that we've ignored every month since he's threatened them. And he keeps saying, you know what? Never mind about those tariff things. The real one's going to be April, he says. So the reciprocal tariffs are supposed to go in April 2nd. And no more cars will be made in Ontario, according to Donald Trump. Watch this. Gov.exe says Donald Trump will now impose a 25% tariff on all cars and light trucks not made in the United States. This will significantly impact places dependent on auto manufacturing, like Ontario. Canada cannot win this trade war, and retaliatory tariffs will only make things worse. And retaliatory tariffs are the only thing that we are offering at all. Nobody is offering anything else. That's the only thing that any leader at any level is offering in order to do something about these tariffs. Just retaliatory tariffs, and we lose on that. We lose bigly. Although, up till now, it seems to have worked. Up till now. We'll see if Trump backs down on April 2nd as well. I didn't think he was going to back down on March 2nd, but we'll see if he backs down on April 2nd. Here we go.
A 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff. We start off with a 2.5% base, which is what we were at, and we go to 25%.
As you stated, we've prepared for your attention a proclamation imposing a 25% tariff on foreign-made cars and light trucks. This is in addition to tariffs that are already in place on those goods. In addition to, as you said, spurring increased domestic manufacture of cars and trucks, we expect that these tariffs will result in over $100 billion of new annual revenue to the United States of America in tariff revenue.
This is the beginning of Liberation Day in America. We're going to... Well,
so that's back to the beginning. So $100 billion in tariffs, is that what he said? That's a lot of money, right? Here is further, they're going to remove any kind of interest paid on loans if you buy American-made cars. So in addition, he wants cars built in the USA, and he wants to reward people for buying them. How do you pump up an industry like this?
We're trying to get approved, if we can. If you borrow money to buy a car, you're allowed to deduct interest payments for purposes of income tax, but only if the car is made in America. So if the car is made in America, you get a loan, you can deduct the interest. That's a big saving.
And that's going to really, really, really hurt Ontario, right? Because even if you could buy an Ontario-made whatever, Toyota, well, it's not American-made, and you can't write off that interest, right? So Kirk says Donald Trump, the administration is looking to make auto loans on in America made cars tax deductible for people. And so it's big. And he says it's all but over for the Canadian auto industry. Yikes. So counter tariffs aren't going to do it. In fact, do you remember 2008, the presidential election 2008, where I think it was John McCain, because of the financial disaster, suspended his account or his campaign and was like, no, we can't do anything about this campaign right now. This campaign's done. All we're going to do is stop and focus on all of the financial disaster and meltdown that's happening. We can't campaign. This is echoes of that. So that's not great. Here's Mark Carney. Here's Mark Carney. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit play. I was trying to make it bigger. Here's Mark Carney talking about the financial disaster. Here we go. Financial disaster. Sorry, the tariffs. Which, I mean, I really think, yeah, it's financial disaster for Ontario. But here we go.
Bush, is it time to speak with
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate that the President and I speak, given the action that he's taken. I'm sure that will happen soon. I'm not going to give you a precise timing on that. In terms of options, which was the second part of Ms. Martin's question, even during a caretaker period of government. We have anticipated this possibility. We have put in place the mechanisms so that if it is appropriate for retaliatory tariffs, and there's many considerations to be taken in those regards, and I want to have the meeting of our cabinet, Canada-US cabinet, other considerations. We need to see the details of the executive order, but we will take the steps that are in the interests of Canadian workers of Canada. We are going to stand up for Canada. We're going to be united, and we will fight in a unified way. And I would say, if I may, and I will add, Lana and Ms. Payne can speak for herself, obviously, the discussions that we've had, the discussions I've had with Premier Ford, we're entirely aligned in terms of the seriousness with which we're taking this.
He says they're entirely aligned in terms of the seriousness with which they're taking it. And that means reciprocal tariffs, et cetera, et cetera. And like, again, not great and not going to solve this problem. Lori Goldstein says, Donald Trump has not talked to Mark Carney since he took office as prime minister. Canada reached out to the White House for a call with Trump last week, but did not receive a reply, according to a source with knowledge of the matter. So that's interesting. And Dan says, I'm betting Carney will hear from the U.S. Department of Justice before Trump talks to him. He's under investigation, Carney is, for breaking antitrust laws. So that's, and it's a very interesting, Carney is connected to the TD Bank guy who was brought under investigation by the Department of Justice for laundering all that drug money, et cetera, et cetera. So like it's a serious, serious thing. And Doug Ford says President Trump is at it again. How dare he, right? His 25% tariffs on cars and light trucks will do nothing more than increase costs for hardworking American families. U.S. markets are already on the decline as the president causes more chaos and uncertainty. He's putting American jobs at risk. I've spoken with Prime Minister Carney. We agree Canada needs to stand firm, strong, and united. I fully support the federal government preparing retaliatory tariffs to show that we will never back down. And so I think that's the wrong move. And I think that while it worked both of the last times, this time feels different. But again, I was wrong in March. So I'm wrong sometimes. It's true. Here is Dave Staples, and he says Danielle Smith lashes out at the Carney Liberals and NDP for doing nothing on tariffs except for indulging in self-righteous tantrums. As for her campaign to sell Americans on free trade, Smith said, I will not be silent. Alberta will not be silent. What say you? And there are people who really like this. People are saying this is a return to form for Smith. Here's Danielle Smith.
And I am now off to...
She's sharing this as well. She's saying, it's 9 minutes, so I don't have a minute-long clip, but we'll listen to the first minute of it. I think it's worthwhile. She says the Nenshi NDP and Carney Liberals would rather use the tariff threat for political gain than to do anything to actually stop them. While they rage in the media, Alberta's UCP government is fighting tooth and nail to protect our jobs, our economy, and our sovereignty. I won't back down, I won't be silent, and I certainly won't let Alberta be sold out by the federal Liberals and their NDP allies. And so here's a bit of Danielle Smith.
Premier has a statement to make.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When U.S. President Donald Trump first announced his threatened tariffs against Canada and began musing about our country becoming the 51st state, many Canadians and Albertans feared for their futures. And why? Because regardless of our political stripe, we all knew that the imposition of 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods to the U.S. would cost the jobs of hundreds of thousands of Canadians, would depress our economy, devastate our budget, and damage the sovereignty of our country. And in the roughly 4 months until just before last weekend's federal election call, premiers, party leaders, and Canadians were united, other than perhaps the Alberta NDP, in working as hard as we could to convince the U.S. President and Congress to reconsider these unjustified actions against our country. In fact, premiers were all encouraged by each other, as well as by the former Prime Minister and his ministers, to visit the U.S., to get on U.S. media, to speak with every U.S. official and influencer we could to convince the U.S. President to refrain from imposing these tariffs. It was all about working as Team Canada for the greater good. Enter Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now, all of a sudden, it's apparently treason to talk to American media personalities that we disagree with. It is disloyal to try and persuade high-profile Republicans holding influence with the President to abandon his tariff policies on Canada. Indeed, it's a high crime to try and convince U.S. officials to refrain from imposing tariffs until after our country has elected a leader with a strong mandate. Shame on all who dare to speak with the enemy, they now say. These are the Team Carney and NDP talking points. Their endgame is quite obvious. Frighten and divide Canadians. Try and make Canadians forget the utter incompetence of Liberal and NDP policies that have been inflicted on this country over the last 10 years. Associate Conservatives.
We'll leave it there. So she's not wrong. She's not wrong. And she's, well, standing up for Alberta in the face of Ottawa wanting to use Alberta's oil as a bargaining chip to prevent Donald Trump from putting these tariffs in. But I don't think it'll work, and neither does Danielle Smith. Here is an Alberta lawyer. He articulates very clearly why he thinks Alberta, as the 51st state, or at least more aligned with the United States, makes the most sense to him. And here's 1 minute. It's 4.5 minutes, but it's a little beyond the scope of the podcast today. But check it out. It's worthwhile. Link is in the description.
So there'd be no more federal income tax. There'd be no GST. There'd be no excise tax. There'd be no carbon tax. There'd be no more equalization payments where taxes, pension, and UI benefits included. We send $70 billion plus a year to Ottawa and get less than $35 billion a year back from the rest of Canada, or Confederation as it's called. So imagine the wealth and the prosperity of this province with all of that money remaining in the province, remaining in the provincial economy. Imagine Alberta with control of its own immigration, so that where we have cities that don't have enough water, don't have enough electricity, don't have enough housing, that we can say, hang on, no vacancy, time out, until we sort out all the people that are presently here and we accommodate everybody that's here, and have a sensible immigration policy as opposed to what we've been dealing with. Imagine in Alberta where we are no longer being subject to arbitrary federal regulations because somebody in Ottawa doesn't like the shape of somebody's hunting rifle, that they just automatically declare all of our hunting rifles to be prohibited, illegal, and subject to seizure to be shipped to the front lines in the war of Ukraine, and other stupid ideas that have come out of Ottawa in the last several years. So I'm confident on those ideas alone, getting rid of, literally, if we get rid of all federal taxation in Alberta, the take-home pay and the disposable income of every Albertan will more than double. Think about the fact that every time a working man or woman goes to the pump to fill up their truck, instead of paying $1.60 for diesel, they're paying 80 cents, which is what it should be. I mean,
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. And I mean, we shouldn't need the United States to come in and rescue us. We should be able to stop this nonsense anyway. Here's Mark Carney abandoning his campaign to worry about tariffs. And Joni says, crushing our canola industry is A-okay in Carney's book, right? Who cares about those Chinese tariffs, these American tariffs? Those are the things that we have to really worry about. And I mean, it's going to crush Ontario. It's absolutely going to crush Ontario. So it's not great. But these people have done absolutely nothing to avert this. These people have, in fact, encouraged this trade war by kind of being a-holes to the United States and Donald Trump's personally. But they haven't done anything to avoid this. Nothing at all. Ashley says Liberal leader Mark Carney has touched down in Windsor, where the auto sector fears Donald Trump tariff threats could crush the industry. He's also expected to visit London and Kitchener. So who cares? Here's Brian Pasfium. Now, this is Carney, Polievre, PPC, and then election issues, because this is what we're going through these days. And I'm going to try and get through it quick. Again, Carney's kind of boring, and so I don't want to bore you, but I want to show you how badly his campaign is going. Brian Pasfium says, the decision by the Mark Carney campaign to allow Detroit Tigers ball cap directly behind the Prime Minister's head during a speech about maintaining Canadian sovereignty in Windsor was an interesting choice. Let's see how it works out for them, Cotton. Right? Like, whew. Yowza. Also, for funny pictures, this is real. And funny things in the background, Evan Solomon says, oh, yay, I'm a Liberal candidate and we're going to make Canada great again or something or other. And there's piss and graffiti below. Like, here's the Mark Carney thing and the Evan Solomon thing. And Mark Carney looks awful because he just looks awful. Like, he looks like a zombie or a corpse or something like that. Somebody was saying he looks like a vampire, but vampires have better teeth. Regardless, underneath this, I don't think that this graffiti or the P is because of these Liberal things. Like, it looks like the graffiti was there beforehand. I mean, the P is fresh, and Evan doesn't seem to care. He's standing in it. Like, it's ridiculous. This is a metaphor for life. This is a metaphor for what we are going through currently. Isn't this unbelievable? Like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me that he's standing there smiling and not self-aware enough to realize what's going on in this picture. So this is how their campaign is going. Everybody can see it but them, apparently. Gov.exe says, watch, Mark Carney claims anyone who accuses him of molesting children with Jeffrey Epstein is pushing CPC conspiracy theories to divide Canadians. What a bullshit response. So this is a campaign stop, and I think you'll be able to hear it. I've got this turned up, and a member of the crowd yells, "How many children did you molest on Epstein Island?" And Mark Carney, it seems to me, he blushes, he goes red, which is like not great when your body betrays you like that. Like the worst thing you could do is blush, and he blushes. So he blushes, and then he kind of struggles for words for about a minute. It's very, very cringe. Here we go. I hope it's loud enough.
Honnêtement.
Three shades. And the camera comes away from him because his face is coloring different.
This is the...
So it was a minute. That was 30 seconds so far.
Ça c'est le produit des politiques de division.
The product of politics of division.
Des théories conspiratoires qui circulent dans les coins cachés, qui sont promouvoirs par le Parti conservateur.
It's the Conservative Party's misinformation, right? I don't think so, Mr. Carney. Wasted Canadian says, a man yells, "How many children did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein during the Mark Carney rally? It takes over a minute for Carney to regroup." Interesting, right? Interesting. I forgot to do it, but I was actually going to start the show instead of my usual. Ryan, if you're watching, can you make me an intro that just has this image multiple times over and over again? I want to run this intro for the whole campaign, because I think that it's not talked about enough that Mark Carney is pictured with international child sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. That seems like a problem, right? Like, hey, Mark Carney, your campaign's not going well. I'm shocked because you're associates with Ghislaine Maxwell. Like, and quite happily so, right? So anyway, Ryan, if you could do that, that would be wonderful. Or anybody who like makes intros like mine. But Ryan, you've done the other one, so I think it's Ryan. Yeah, I think it's Ryan. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. Anyway, regardless, nobody seems to care about the whole Ghislaine Maxwell thing, and that's a problem, I think, also. So weird, right? And Mark Carney doesn't have much of a response. He kind of laughs about it, which it's a pretty serious thing, right? I don't think you can just laugh off all of this like they laughed off Pizzagate. Darshan Maharaja says, can any journalist ask the following question to Mark Carney without breaching any confidentiality? What can you tell us about Brookfield acquiring a 49% stake in an oil pipeline of Abu Dhabi in partnership with Ontario Teachers Pension Fund? And people were saying, like, I wonder what the teachers will think of owning a pipeline in Abu Dhabi, right? Like, I'm sure the returns are nice, but you know, ideological teachers and all that. House of Commons staffer says, hey, where does Mark Carney file his taxes? Linda says, reminder to Canadians that April 30th is the deadline to file your taxes unless you're shielding your earnings in offshore accounts, in which case, never mind. Right, Mark Carney? So here is Mark Carney shielding him and his investors' money in Bermuda, which is a zero tax rate nation and a well-known tax haven. This is a CTV report, so take it with a grain of salt. But Dan says Mark Carney set up a $25 billion green fund at Brookfield, then funneled it through a notorious tax haven to dodge Canadian taxes. His corporate holdings and financial interests still hidden offshore. No wonder Carney is so desperate to cover his conflicts and keep Canadians in the dark. What else is he hiding? Indeed. Here we go.
Now, Mark Carney was also dealing with controversy today. The Liberal leader was asked about his previous position with Brookfield, a global alternative asset manager, and the use of Bermuda as a tax haven. CTV's Judy Trin is in Windsor. And Judy, tell us about the backlash that Mr. Carney is now facing.
Sandy, Mark Carney really wanted to talk about the Liberal policy to protect the auto industry. Instead, he was pressed on his previous job with Brookfield Asset Management.
Look, I'm beholden to absolutely no one except to the Canadian people.
The job Mark Carney wants, to be Prime Minister, could be impacted by the job he had as chair of Brookfield Asset Management, where he managed 2 investor funds valued at $25 billion, registered in the tax haven of Bermuda. As Carney appeals to middle-class voters like auto workers, his opponents are using the information to try and undermine him.
He chose to register in another country to avoid paying those taxes. That's less money for healthcare, less money for seniors.
This 2023 report shows that a union from BC wanted Brookfield to issue a tax transparency report. They were concerned it topped the list of companies that avoided paying the largest amount of income tax. But Brookfield management recommended shareholders vote against it, saying it could force the disclosure of sensitive information about operations that could put the securities company at a competitive disadvantage.
Yeah. Oh, this is funny. This is actually hilarious. This guy says, well, yeah, it's not illegal, but most people wouldn't like it.
There's nothing illegal about this, but I think there's a significant public sentiment that this kind of thing is wrong and should not be allowed.
Carney.
Well, it's not illegal, but I mean, most people view it as wrong. So. It's like Hillary Clinton saying there's nothing, there was no regulation I violated. Andrew Scheer says the guy who wants to hike your taxes has been secretly hiding his. As Liberals spent years calling small business owners and farmers tax cheats, Mark Carney was shielding his investment from Canadian taxes. Why doesn't Carney disclose his assets so we can see what else he's hiding? Right, so it's going badly for Mark Carney. Love My Sevenwood says, why has Mark Carney not even spoke with Donald Trump? How can he be the best candidate to deal with him when he won't even call Trump? So I think there's other things going on there that we're not privy to at this point in time. Mark Miller says, opinion, Mark Carney embraces the power of positive campaigning, says the Globe and Mail. Stacy says, that's not true. That's the opposite of what's happening. He's been browbeating reporters, right? Look inside yourself, Rosemary. Stacy says, if you call positive campaigning getting angry about local reporters in Halifax taking up his time asking questions, getting the name of his candidate wrong, plus the name of the school of the mass shooting wrong, calling Mendocino a woman, and kicking an already nominated MP to the curb to bring back a failed immigration and housing minister, claiming to be saving Canada while using offshore accounts to avoid paying taxes in Canada, then sure, yeah, super positive. Here is Brian Lilly. He says, remember, Carney and all of his media sycophants are claiming that he's running a positive campaign. I could post multiple clips a day of him being negative and nasty towards his opponents, but here he's nasty to the media, but he's a Liberal, so all is good. Here's just a little bit, 45 seconds of Carney being kind of nasty over the last week. Here we go.
So in 9 days between when I was sworn in and when the Governor General accepted to call the election, in those 9 days, we did more than Pierre Poilievre has imagined in all of his decades in politics.
In 9 days? And they, under a prorogued parliament, they haven't done anything. What? Out of touch doesn't even begin to describe it. Sorry, this wasn't a clip of him being nasty. I think that maybe that clip is here. No, this is Mark Carney addressing auto workers, and if you can see the 90,000 yard look, right? This guy's like, what did I just listen to? Mark Carney walks in and says, well, this is what he says. He's not charismatic at all. Here we go.
Can everyone hear me? Hopefully not. If you're lucky, you can't hear me. If you're unfortunate, you're close, you can hear me. Mark Carney, Prime Minister. You got Chris Sutton, who is a former millwright who's running for MP in Essex. So if you're in Essex or know anyone in Essex and you want someone in Parliament who actually knows what he's doing, he's our guy. And Eric Ismarek, who is the MP here.
Boring. He's just boring. And then by the end of it, we'll just skip to the end here.
Which is, the Americans are hurting themselves. So, look, thank you for everything you're doing. The government's here for you. These guys are here for you. I'm the spokesperson. They're the experts. Thank you.
Is that the job of the Prime Minister, to be the spokesperson and to defer to some random experts? Honestly, here's BUAC, and Mark Carney claims we will build an all-in-Canada auto manufacturing network. It will be powered by Canadian workers using Canadian steel, aluminum, and critical minerals. BUAC says they didn't build 4 million homes. They didn't plant 2 billion trees. There's no way they're building a $51 billion auto sector. Learn to code. Oh, wait. So Yaza, right? Ryan says Judy Trin believes this is 1,650 people at the Carney rally in Kitchener. It's quite hard to believe that number looking at this photo. What do you think, right? And so Grok estimates 200 to 300 people. What do you think? 1,600 people? I think maybe more than 200 to 300, but maybe not much more. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like Carney events are well attended. And are they using services like Hire a Friend or findafriend.com or something to that effect? Very interesting. Marty up north is showing off this COP26 video of Mark Carney talking about the climate agenda. Somebody in the chat on Twitch was just sharing that Mark Carney will impose the climate change scam. So yeah, like I think he probably will. That's part of the function of installing a prime minister like Carney. Here he is talking about the climate scam and talking about how industry and finance is going to have to drive this. Here we go.
26. 2 years ago, only $5 trillion in the financial system was explicitly committed to net zero. That number grew to $130 trillion. That's 40% of global financial assets. Global financial institutions can play a number of roles to help economies in the transition. First, the most obvious is to get money, to get capital to those companies that have plans to get their emissions down. And so part of that is, I'd say, the easy bit, which is to build new renewable power, wind, solar, soon at great scale hydrogen, also hydroelectric, and in some cases nuclear. But the more complex part is finding those companies in industries that have high emissions. Think of the steel industry, aviation, much of manufacturing, and finding those companies that have plans, that have to make big investments to get those emissions down.
So he's pushing this. He's more green than the Greens. I mean, is he drinking with Elizabeth May? Rex says, name a Canadian vehicle. So which Canadian vehicles are we going to be making? Carney says a Liberal government will buy Canadian vehicles to grow our auto industry and create more good union jobs. The Toyota Corolla, that's a Canadian vehicle, right? Oh, no, that's Japanese. Whoops. I mean, you can excuse me for not realizing. Canada Proud says there's no way Quebec is going to vote for this guy. Mark Carney tries to smear Poilievre, but can't do it in French, so he switches to English. Here we go.
Monsieur Poilievre, il devient de plus en plus fâché, désespéré. Il invente toutes les choses. Il est un homme he's a conspiracy theorist. Spends too much time with his MAGA friends, and he comes up with whatever he can think of.
Weak. Baseless allegations, baseless smears, and it's weak. Canada Proud says, does this man have a shred of respect for the working men and women of this country? He's talking about offshoring the investments of Brookfield to benefit the taxpayers, investment vehicles of his clients, and he says they pay taxes when they get the money out. Bull poop, absolute bull poop. So it is, Mark Carney is not having a good go of it, but they still might install him as prime minister anyway. Pierre Poilievre says, is it too much to ask the prime minister to disclose all assets he has in tax havens? Poilievre says Mark Carney hid his corporate assets in Bermuda to dodge taxes that Liberals forced on Canadians. He will always favor tax havens because his corporate assets are still hidden in one. That's not wrong. And here's Poilievre again talking about Mark Carney shielding his assets in places that regular Canadians like you or me don't really have access to. I mean, I'm sure I could shield my assets in Bermuda, but it would be really, really complicated. And I'm not sure that that would raise more red flags than it would protect me, I think, right? Anyway, here's Poilievre talking about that.
And the journalists who follow this stuff very carefully do not know all the conflicts that Mr. Carney admits that he has. Now, he claims that somehow this money gets funneled through a Bermuda tax haven only to come back to Canada. Well, why wouldn't he just leave it in Canada in the first place? If it were going to be taxed in Canada, he wouldn't need to funnel it through Bermuda. I don't know, how many of you funnel your investments through Bermuda before you bring them back to pay taxes? I think the answer is zero. And so Mr. Carney makes these workers who are struggling to pay their bills pay full taxes in Canada while he ships his investments off to Bermuda to dodge his obligations to this country. That's money that should be going in tax revenue to fund our schools and our hospitals, but instead it's going to pad the pockets of millionaires and billionaires like him. He thinks that taxes are just for the little people, not for big shot bankers like him. This is exactly the wrong kind of experience we need in a prime minister, and the worst kinds of conflicts of interest he will use. He says, by the way...
We'll leave it there. So, yeah, I mean, who would vote for a prime minister like that? Honestly, I mean, who would vote for a globalist prime minister, period? But still, who would vote for somebody who's explicitly using tax loopholes? Right? Wild. Absolutely incredible. John Fraser says, a standing ovation in Quebec City for Pierre Poilievre. I think the pollsters have some explaining to do. And here we go. Hold on. I'll point out a funny double standard, I suppose. Tax loopholes, when called out on using tax loopholes, Donald Trump countered with, you put them there. So of course I use them. So who would vote for people who use tax loopholes when it's framed in the right way, right? I guess people would vote for Donald Trump. But it feels more icky the way Carney's framing it. He's not saying, I'm going to protect you from this. I'm going to fix all this. No. He's saying, no, this is above board. My American company can filter Canadian investments through Bermuda. What's the problem with that? Right? So, right? It's different. There's the difference. Anyway, here's Poilievre.
The rest of Canada has to learn from Quebec's determination and its courage to protect its way of life, culture, and identity. Quebecers, do not tear down their statues, pull down their flags, or hide who they are. They sing their songs, tell their stories, and wave their flag.
There you go. And standing ovation, right? So to show it, everybody stands up. And so there you go. Are pollsters wrong about Quebec? Because it's going Bloc Québécois blue, right? Is Mr. Blanchet able to get this kind of response? I mean, probably. But who knows, right? Is it actually a more tight race than it appears? Here's Pierre again, introducing Canada First TFSAs top up. A new Conservative government will let you put an extra $5,000 a year into your TFSA investment in Canada. Bring it home. And the overwhelming response to this has been, people don't have an extra $5,000 to put into their TFSAs. Have you not seen what's going on around Canada? And so it's good because more tax-free money and all the rest of that stuff, that's beneficial, right? But at the same time, if you can't actually take advantage of that, well, then who is it actually helping? Unfortunate, right? We should have more tax breaks. Is a more room in your TFSA a tax break? Not really. Here's Sam Cooper, and he's responding to Mark Miller. Mark Miller says, Mr. Poilievre's relentless hyperbolic smearing of the country's condition made Canadians feel worse than warranted. He drove the mood of the country down. The book on Pierre Poilievre, he's an angry teenager in the body of a grown man. This is a Globe and Mail piece, okay? Disappointed Globe and Mail. Sam Cooper says, fact check, Canada is more broken than the Conservatives said. What would you call an estimated $1 trillion laundered through Vancouver and Toronto real estate fraud since 2010? Alder Lang Eggs, Mark Miller is implicated in breaking immigration. But nice PMO whisperer op-ed. Yeah, right? So somebody's paid for that. It's a puff piece that making big money for the Globe and Mail. Mark Nixon highlights this, Pierre's security clearance. Tom Mulcair shuts everyone down. So I'll just play a minute of this. Tom Mulcair agrees with Pierre Poilievre not to get the security clearance and not to dance to the Liberals' tune, basically. And I think he's right. And it's just interesting that the whole push of this security clearance, they're trying to recycle this and make this into an election issue. It wasn't an issue then, when they were trying to make it an issue about and distract from the Green Slush Fund and all of the improper procurement, all of the money wasted, all of the fraud that the Liberals were trying to cover up in the September to December period of time in 24. They didn't do anything to fix it, right? And they didn't. And so now Mr. Mulcair is saying Poilievre is right to ignore this. And they're just trying to make something out of nothing. And it's nothing. And so I don't know. I just want you to hear it from an former NDP leader. But I think the NDP were a completely different party under Mulcair. I digress.
Understanding the posture Mr. Poilievre had taken at the time, do you think the position is as tenable today as it was then?
I made the same comments to your colleague Todd this afternoon on CTV News Channel. I agree completely with Pierre Poilievre on this. I believe he is completely right. You do not accept to play this mugs game where you restrain your ambit and your ability to act as leader of the official opposition, which is a constitutional role to hold the government to account. And this game where you have people in the hierarchy of the security establishment saying, oh, he really should come in, but then he's not allowed to talk about it anymore. Really? Didn't we just have a commission of inquiry headed up by Madame Justice Hogue, who put all of this stuff away and said there might have been a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but all of a sudden we're talking about whether Poilievre actually got the 68%. What, maybe it was 67%? This is madness, to try to make this an issue in a campaign that is so serious for the country, to try to go back to this stuff and to try to complain about Poilievre wanting to do his constitutional duty.
What did you say there? So it is. They're trying to make this a campaign issue. It wasn't an issue then. And the issue then was the Green Slush Fund. And they wanted to knock the Conservatives off their game because the Conservatives were filibustering successfully. And they failed then, and they failed now. And they're just throwing anything at the wall that they think might be able to stick, right? The other day, yesterday, I showed you this video showing the CTV running PPC having 52, or 84 seats. That was January 1st prediction, 52 seats. And then if you go forward to the 28th of February, it's 84 seats, okay? So seat projections. And so CTV issued this, because Remy, the remanded, followed up and asked for, like, what is this? What is this? And they said, hi, Remy, thanks for getting in touch, sharing below a statement from CTV News. We can confirm the graphic in question aired erroneously on CTV National News, and the story appeared on CTV News channel as well. It was quickly corrected for additional broadcasts. And so, I mean, that's interesting. What leads to this happening? There's more questions than answers based on that, right? Like, yes, it was real. Yes, it ran. It's erroneous. Why is it erroneous? What is erroneous about it? Can you explain? Was the image doctored prior to being aired? And later episodes, later things aired with this as seats that were too close to call. But okay, like, what does that mean? Right? And it seems like a situation where I think our elections are rigged. I think our polls are rigged. And it seems like a situation where somebody's maybe trying to tell us the real story here. But I don't know that that's going to play out to actually 84 seats. Hopefully the PPC gets some seats, but who knows, right? Again, I say our elections are very, very rigged. Salvage Peeps says, so just because they said it was an error, we believe it? Someone made that image. It doesn't just appear on screen. Someone made it. So from thinking the image to making it to airing it, how many steps in between? And it was an accident? For anyone believing this to be false, it has been admitted by CTV to have been aired. Community Notes stated a falsehood that the video was doctored. So, like, the video wasn't doctored, it aired. How did that happen? And who was the editor who allowed it to happen? How does this all get put together? You know, like, at some point in time, people are trusted, but, like, did somebody lose their job for this? Or is this accurate and they didn't want this label going out? Like, there's so many questions, more questions than answers. So be aware that they're playing silly buggers with all of this, and they're doing it on purpose. Here is Pierre Poilievre. Yesterday, the Pierre Poilievre page was active on the WEF website. Today, not active anymore. So that's interesting as well, right? Maxime Bernier says, pandering Pierre says he wants to tie the number of immigrants to the number of homes we build so the housing crisis doesn't get worse. At first glance, that sounds reasonable, but what does it really mean? It means that he wants to build a lot more homes, not to fix the housing crisis for Canadians, but to import as many foreigners as possible. His proposal of about 250,000 more permanent residents per year, or 1 million during a Conservative mandate, while we are in the middle of a social and economic crisis caused by immigration, is still mass immigration. It sure is. Yeah, it sure is. And is that going to be fixed? It doesn't seem like it's going to be fixed. And it does seem like Poilievre is going to be the winner of the next election. Of course, it looks like also Mark Carney could be installed, although I think the headwinds against that are getting worse and worse and worse. So it's going to be an interesting ride to the end of April. And do you think that there's any kind of Donald Trump going to not put the tariffs on for April 2nd because we're in an election, right? No? I don't know. Again, I make the comparison of, like, you have somebody who you want to break up with and they say, you can't do this to me. It's my birthday. And, like, okay, so I'm not going to break up with you now because it's your birthday, like, in April. And what? So we're supposed to pretend until your birthday and then we're broken up? I don't know. I don't think that's going to work, right? So like, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think Trump's going to go for it. But I really have no idea, because the last 2 times I've thought, man, things are going to get bumpy. And then kind of nothing happened. So, and I don't want bumpy. I don't want the tariffs. I don't want any of that. I don't like that idea. I want to figure out a way to fix this problem in the best way possible. I want the shortest line back to sanity in Canada. And we are getting further and further away from sanity. And I want to stop that. But we've got to say goodbye to the stream. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you tomorrow. For everybody else, we'll carry on for the... Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful